What's up, guys? Welcome to the Process for Cinch Cycling. Figured I'd get the podcast going again. I feel like every episode I talk like that, but yeah, we're gonna try and just restart, get this thing up and going, and start off with this episode being some fun stuff, talking about some of the racing and some of the pro cycling that's going on. So yeah, pumped to be back on the podcast and talking a little bit. I've really enjoyed many, or some of you may follow me on Twitter or X. I've enjoyed kind of sharing my thoughts about the pro cycling stuff there. And the hope is on this podcast, kind of bring it all back together, talk about pro cycling, but also bring it into things and concepts that you guys can use to improve your cycling. So the idea of the show, the process, is really just to break down, the things and the different types of training, different types of race strategy, different things with nutrition, mindset, performance oriented concepts that will help you get that 1% better. So I'm Tom Danielson. I was a pro cyclist, world tour pro cyclist for about 15 years. And now I'm a coach, cycling coach. I own Cinch Cycling, and it's a business that we work with all types of people and abilities and help them use the sport of cycling to improve their lives. And then of course, if they're racing and competing, help them do that a little bit better or a lot better. So I personally have been coming back to fitness and getting into training and racing again. That's been quite a fun experiment that I've been doing and learning a lot of cool things. And I'll be sharing those with you guys on the podcast. One of the things in the upcoming episodes that I'm going to talk about is my experience racing in Europe again. Got to do that this last couple weeks, and that was fun. But we're not going to talk about that on this podcast. We're going to talk about Wout van Aert and the awesome race that we saw today in Brabantse Pijl. And so this is a race that I never did. So I wasn't a big fan of one day racing, and I wasn't a big fan of the classics. And now that I kind of look back at the sport, I definitely regret the fact that I never really took this stuff seriously, because as a fan and as a coach, and now that I'm getting into like one day racing with gravel stuff, it's fun, it's different, it's explosive, it's exciting. There's a lot of really cool things that I think, when I was a pro cyclist, I was just married to the idea that I was a Grand Tour rider. And I just didn't really open up my mind that, yeah, these races have climbs. There's a lot of them. It's very active and exciting racing. And maybe that was something I could have wrapped my head around a little bit more. But the only one day races that I did in the Ardennes Classics was I did Flèche Wallonne and I did Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But a lot of my teammates did Brabantse Pijl, and sounded like it was an amazing race. But watching it on TV today, there was definitely some exciting stuff I want to talk about on the podcast, and some things that I think we should really start to discuss in social media and out there about Wout van Aert, because as fans were watching his comeback from his knee injury. We're watching his comeback, after a another injury during the last season. We're watching his comeback kind of, last year it took him almost the whole season to regain his form. Starts going really fast at the Vuelta again, and then has this horrific crash where, big injury to the knee. And I think for most people would have put them out for a whole career. So here he is. He's back racing again. He's just done all the different classics, the Flemish classics. He's performed quite well, but today's race, I watched him. It just seemed like he was on another level. And we're going to talk about in this podcast some of the things that I saw that I believe kind of put him in a new category for him as a personal athlete, and some things that, I think is worth talking about here on the podcast about, what a comeback truly is and how important adversity is in finding our next level. A lot of people on the internet, they're kind of talking bad about his sprint, or talking bad about these near misses, talking bad about kind of mistakes that he's making. And they're kind of missing the point, right? Which is like, well, maybe he's not trying to be perfect. And maybe he's not trying to match his previous performances. Maybe he's thinking bigger picture. Maybe there's a storm brewing in the world of Wout, right? And so, this podcast, we're going to talk about it, right? There's a lot of things that happened in this particular race. I'm not really going to get into those. So if you really want to watch the race, you're going to have to dive into it. Obviously, Remco made a return, and I think that deserves its own podcast after this one. But here, I just want to talk about Wout van Aert and his performance in Brabantse Pijl and how this performance will lead to perhaps new growth and new opportunities that are coming up in his career, right? And so, you know, I get on Twitter or I get on X today after the race and I start talking about like, first of all, wow, Remco came out at an amazing level, but wow, like he was super strong. He was pushing the pace on all the climbs. He was the one that made the big selection, the first selection with his big attack his teammates set up. He went pole for pole with Remco, and it came down to a sprint, and he didn't have anything left in the sprint. But in my opinion, right, like amazing performance, right? And we know Remco, or at least I believe Remco is on a completely new level this year. Same type of concept of Wout coming back from adversity, using that adversity to leverage a new spot. But we get into this race, and Wout is right there with the Olympic champion Remco on a pretty hilly course. And keep in mind, this is 4 days after Paris-Roubaix, right? So you don't see too many other racers out there doing a race on Friday after Paris-Roubaix, right? This guy is out there. He's competing for the win. He's right there, and I'm pumped. I get on X, and I'm just like, write something about, wow, that was really cool to see him up there. And I got so many comments and so much flack how people were just basically putting him down and saying like this guy can't sprint himself out of a wet paper bag. He's not even close to a shadow of his former self. Like he's just not even on the same level as he used to be. And like from my perspective, that's not at all what I saw. So this podcast, I want to break down some of the quotes that people wrote kind of on the social media, share them with you guys, and then kind of go through my perspective on where he's at with these ideas, right? So this is kind of like what the general population is kind of, or the vocal, loud population maybe on the internet is thinking, and then I'm going to kind of come at it with my perspective and say, hey, maybe things are a little bit different than people are seeing, right? So the first thing is, everyone's saying like Wout is washed. His sprint's pathetic compared to his 2021 Champs-Elysees winning sprint. All right, guys. Like everyone has this kind of like vision of like what Wout's sprint should be. And if you look at him, fair game, right? Like he's a bigger rider. He has a lot of muscles, and we've all seen him win field sprints. We've seen him win all kinds of sprints. But look at the people that are at the front of the race at Brabantse Pijl. Look at the people that are at the front of the race at Tour of Flanders. Look at the people that are at the race, right? Like these athletes are different than field sprinters. So that would entail that the race is much harder than a traditional race that would see a field sprint. So I hear people's criticism. I say, hey, they say, hey, where's the 2021 Wout van Aert? Where's this guy? And so I just like, in my mind, I remember I'm like, this guy's lost all kinds of sprints before, right? Like, why are we freaking out? And I go back to 2021. I see his results. They're incredible. It's like, all these Tour de France stages. And then, of course, the one that's in everyone's mind, him winning on the Champs-Elysees. And so I go back and I look and I'm like, oh, wow, look, he did Brabantse Pijl, right? He did the same race. And I look at the results sheet second and I'm like, okay, I want to see who won, right? Because again, we don't normally see sprinters in this race. So let's see who took Wout van Aert out in Brabantse Pijl. Guess what? The guy that beat him in 2021 was the rookie Tom Pidcock, right? 58 kilos, right? Like 120 something pound rider beats Wout van Aert in the sprint. And sure enough, I go search on the internet. Like there are so many articles and YouTube videos and stuff that is like tearing him apart and saying like, this is, they even had like a crying face, emoji on there and saying like, look at this guy. Like he's a shell of his former self. Like back in 2021, they were saying the exact same things. And then if you look in 2021 after the race, right? He was exceptional at the Tour de France, right? Like he won all kinds of stages. He won the Ventoux stage, right? He won the Champs-Élysées stage. He won a time trial. And so this particular thing like is in line with, or this particular fact is in line with like my way of thinking, where it's just like, okay, you know, people are sensitive, right, to seeing a bigger rider lose to a smaller rider. But let's be real, like on these courses, like with so many hills and so many repeats, the bigger riders, they have to put out more power. They get worn down. If you look at the riders that typically win this race, like they are smaller riders, right? Like Alaphilippe is a former winner of this. Like Philippe Gilbert is a former winner of this. So he's a bigger rider to perform super well in this. So like the fact that he's in the final and he's going for the sprint with the Olympic champion, in my head, right, is like this guy is on a good level. And especially 4 days after Paris-Roubaix, I I think that this is a sign for his level coming, that it is on the way up big time. And I think this second place to Remco, and we will see in the next races like exactly what level Remco's at. But I would guess Remco is going to be one of the top riders at the upcoming races, right? In the Ardennes Classic. All right. So the next quote that I hear, like, is there a chance Wout will ever reach a high level again? Right? Like, what are the chances that he's going to get up there and he's going to be good again? And it's like, I go back and I look at his results, and you just see that there are tons of results that are sixth places and eighth places and 10th places and 11th places in the same seasons that where he will then go on and just absolutely dominate stages in the Tour de France or in the Vuelta or other races. And there's been years that like he won Milan San Remo and then is in like eighth place in one of the other classics. And so when we look at like even this season, the one that people are being so critical, and we look at Tour of Flanders this year, right? Like he is fourth place in this race, right? He is the same time as Mathieu van der Poel, the rider that won Milan San Remo, won E3, and won Paris-Roubaix, and you could arguably say is the best classics rider this spring, right? The Flemish Classics. He's on the same time as him. So like it is hard to like look at these results and say like these aren't good. They are good. Like knee injury out the door, right? Like say like he didn't even have the knee injury. These results are good, right? And so if you bring in the knee injury into perspective, and you bring into like his first race in Algarve where he was really struggling and wasn't necessarily with the first riders, like you bring in his Ghent Wevelgem, right, where he's a little bit off the pace there. You see that he is a rider that is building form and is getting better, and he's getting results now that are better than in years past, and he's been at these races. And you could argue as well that the riders now are riding faster. They're doing more power. The times are coming down on the climbs. Like he's at a disadvantage being the rider that he is, but he is going faster than I believe in years past. So I think that his level is much higher right now than it's ever been. And I think that this level is going to continue to go up, given kind of the run in that he's had into this level. Right. All right. The next quote, and this one like hit me pretty hard. Like this person wrote, it's embarrassing how he keeps losing all the sprints. Right. And like as a non-sprinter, like, and I'm a climber, right? Like I must be so embarrassing, right? Because I lose like pretty much like almost all the sprints. Although I did do well in one sprint recently, but I'm losing sprints nonstop. So like, I don't know about all the other sprinters, but like I think the real sprinters are also losing sprints. The reality is like people see Wout losing a lot of sprints because he's in all the sprints. Right? Like if there's a sprint that's on TV for a victory or for a podium, Wout's in it. He's been in it this year. So this is something that I want you guys to like wrap your head around. If you're like thinking about Wout and you're thinking, man, like his sprint's so bad this year, like maybe you're not thinking that at all, but like if you've seen him this year and you've seen him get beat, like that is because that he has made the selection that he's there to do the sprint. Now, just like I believe Wayne Gretzky has this quote, but you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And so a quote like that, right? Like this is kind of like a Wout van Aert ism in cycling, right? Where this guy is taking all the shots. He's in all the races. He's in the mountains. He's in the classics. He's in the field sprints. He's in the time trials. This guy is always in the front. And because of that, like oftentimes he's not winning. He's visible. He's in the top 3. He's in the top 5. He's in the top 10, but he's not winning. And that apparently is really hard for some people to swallow. They're thinking, this guy is lost his sprint. He's lost his edge. But he's up there. And for him to be up there, that takes a lot of energy. And for him to be up there with riders like Van der Poel and Remco and Tade, like that is turning himself inside out to even be there with these riders. And the fact that he's able to sprint afterwards, awesome. These classics races are not like other races, are not like your local criterium, are not like your local Grand Fondo or road race or group ride or wherever where people are sitting in and they're doing the sprint at the end. These guys are like in a cage match where they're just battle doming it out all day long with attacks and climbs and crosswind splits and fighting for position and things like that. Like the sprint is the last thing on their mind. And when they get to the finish line, they have barely anything left and they have to muster some degree of a sprint out, which is so difficult. And so again, like people are seeing him losing these sprints because he's in the sprints and because he can get to those sprints. That's what makes him exceptional. How we can watch him over the course of 3 weeks long battle it out for the win and for the podium in 4 different races that are completely different from one another. So in my mind, that's an exceptional ability and exceptional performance right now when the sports level is at the highest it's ever been, let alone, again, like coming back after a knee injury. And so pretty powerful information, pretty powerful statement with those facts and that information, I think. The next person said, Wout needs to race differently. He's no MVP Pogačar or Evenepoel anymore. And I was like, this is intense, right? Like, first of all, he was never any of those riders, right? Like each one of those particular riders, like when you say their name, like you can kind of think of their domain, right? Like Van der Poel, right? Like Paris-Roubaix, right? Like that kind of comes to mind. Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, World Championships, like kind of big one-day races. He's kind of the king of that, right? Cyclocross. Pogačar, he's obviously like a little bit more difficult, but like for him right now comes to mind World Championship, right? Comes to mind Tour de France, Giro. Like, he's the guy, right? That is the number one in the sport, number one, right? Evenepoel, right? Like Olympic champion, Olympic time trial, Olympic road race champion. Like that's just what comes to mind. Like he's won world championships. He's won the Vuelta. He's won Liège, best in Liège. He's got a lot of really good results, but that Olympic performance really is what stands out. So like, well, where does Wout come into that, right? Like when you look at those different riders, like is he a specialist in any of those kind of domains? And the answer is like no, right? Like he's different, right? Like he's not the wearing the rainbow bands, right? He's not winning a Grand Tour, and he's not winning the Olympics. And so he's kind of in his own domain, which is like this guy can win at any moment. He can win any of those races. He could win the Olympics. He could win the World Championships. Heck, he probably could win a big stage race or a Grand Tour someday. You don't really know what he's going to do next. You don't really know what his focus is going to be, and you don't really know what race he's going to excel at, but you know he's going to be up there. And so for me, like as a cycling fan, you value that, right? Because he's kind of the guy that's always going to be in the race. And, given those other riders have really taken an area of the sport over, you can say that, like, in a sense, he's a bit of the underdog, right? Like if he can get to the finish with those guys, maybe he can beat them in a sprint. And this will kind of open up the next thing I'm going to talk about in this podcast, kind of maybe where he's going. But if you think about what I just said, right? Like he doesn't really stand out with an edge over any of those riders in their domain. And so I think that's important to kind of like digest when you're thinking about, how he's performing is like, well, if he goes into any race with one of those riders, he's gonna be extremely challenged, and he probably is, ranks behind them as a favorite. Even if he goes into cyclocross races, he ranks behind Van der Poel, right? An area where he stands out from those riders is probably that ability to win stages in the Tour de France, where maybe the GC guys are a little fatigued in particular areas. Maybe he can catch one of those early stages that's a mix of climbing and sprinter puncher type terrain. Maybe when he goes to the Giro, maybe he can win stages in the Giro. Maybe he can take over the GC lead for a little bit. Maybe he could even race GC to the finish. It's not a guarantee. He's not the favorite, but we all can see him doing that. And so that's important when we look at, who Wout really is going into these races. And, if he's not winning, well, then like that's fine, right? Like these guys have the number one on their back. They have the rainbow jersey, right? They have the gold helmet and the gold bike. And so we don't really need to like freak out when, he's going to these races and finishing behind these racers, right? We want to root for him. We want to see him get in there, but we don't need to freak out and say, oh, he's washed up. Like he has had obviously some injuries, some setbacks, but also kind of think about the responsibility he's had in terms of winning the Tour de France, like with Jonas, right? He's been instrumental in those victories, and he's pulled out stage wins himself alongside of that. And I think, that's expensive. That's difficult, and that's going to take away from you, like when you're in, your other races and, the races before that and races after that, where he has to be there for Jonas. You can't ignore those things. Whereas a Van der Poel, obviously Pogacar or Remco, like they don't have the responsibility of helping a teammate out, in a way where they're so instrumental for that teammate to actually win the race. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that's something that's really unique that Wout puts him that he's put himself in that position, and I think it's exciting to see like how that will evolve into like whether he ends up doing more stuff for himself or he goes to the Tour de France and does a lot for his teammate. I think it will probably be a mix of both. One thing I want to talk a little bit about, the other part of this conversation is this: Wout needs to race differently. He's not one of these other riders. I think like if you look at the way that he raced Flanders, if you look at the way that he's raced towards the Vlaanderen, if you look at the ways that he raced Brabantse Pijl, like he was aggressive during the race, right? Like he pushed for those moves to happen. Like he attacked on climbs. He drove the break. He was instrumental in opening the gap up. He, even in Flanders with Tadej, and he was throwing attacks before the climb, knowing that those guys were going to launch climb or attacks in the climbs. Now, if you were him, right, and you were in this position that like he's in, where he's coming back from injury, he's building form, and he has a good sprint. If you were him, like a logical strategy would be to be conservative, right? Follow the wheels, sort of like Van der Poel has been playing, right? Make the other racers drop you. Make Remco drop you, right? Like when they were the three Vismas and the EF Nielsen Paulus, like he could have just sat on, right? He had his other teammates there. He could have had his teammates pull all the way to the finish, but he was the guy that launched the attack on the climb that broke the three riders away. He was a rider that drove that break of four riders, three Visma away. This is a very aggressive style of racing, and this does in fact hurt your chances to win the sprint. So you have to kind of think above this and say, like, okay, like maybe his strategy in this whole thing is to build his ability to race this way. Maybe he's looking at some of these other riders like we talked about and seeing that they kind of are specialists and own their their style of racing, and he's looking at, okay, how can I invent my style of racing? It's going to be aggressive. It's going to maybe try to set up an individual time trial situation for myself. But, it looks like he's trying to evolve from, follow, cover, win the sprint strategy and get into a more aggressive, fast-paced strategy, right? And so looking at that, like I think that the way he's raced is kind of foreshadowing the type of training foreshadowing the results and the way he's going to chase some stuff probably in the Grand Tours coming up. Maybe we'll see some more performances like this in the Ardennes Classics, but I would expect Giro d'Italia, Tour de France, wherever he exactly ends up with the Grand Tours, I would expect a lot of fireworks and very aggressive riding on his part and being at a super, super high level. So, just like we saw in 2021, where, he got beat in a lot of the early spring races, he really came back in a big way and dominated the Tour de France stages and overall performance. So definitely excited to see those things play out and see like how he develops. Right. In terms of like, what does this all mean in terms of, cycling performance and coaching, and like, why am I even talking about this stuff on the podcast? And, it all comes down to, how do we handle adversity and, how do people like Wout that are in the, in the limelight, that are at the highest level of the sport, like, what do they do that we can learn from and, we can take from their experiences and apply to our own. And the first one is, I think all you guys should really absorb this is, adversity is always opportunity, and it's opportunity to reinvent yourself. It's opportunity to build yourself stronger. It's opportunity to, get to the next level. You don't want to waste any good adversity on feeling bad for yourself or, accepting the setback. You are set back, but it is setting you up for your next level. And when I say that, I say that from experience. I've had many times in my career, I've had many times, after my cycling career in my life, in my business, I have had times recently with my health where, I've had tremendous adversity, life-changing adversity, career-changing adversity that has put me up against a wall where I had to change, where I wasn't going to move forward. And you've got to, in that moment, look at that adversity, look at that forced change, that change that you are being demanded of making, own it and get on with it. Right? The sooner you get on with it, the sooner you own it, the sooner that you find a solution and leverage it to level yourself up, the better you're going to get, because you're going to have so much more momentum pulling you forward, right? Or pushing you forward. This adversity that you guys have, right, doesn't have to be a negative thing. This knee injury that Wout had, he's going to turn it around. Like, this whole point of the first part of this podcast is to show you, like, this guy is not down and out like everyone's saying. And you can take this podcast or you can come back to it in July or August or whenever, and listen and say, you know what? Like, you're right. Like, he is on another level and he will do it. And we're seeing the same thing with Remco. We've seen it with Tade. We've seen it with Jonas. We've seen it with all the greats, right? People are dealt with a horrible hand, and they use that to leverage and create a better version of themselves. And so, what I'm seeing now, also that I want to share in this podcast with Wout, is that like on the comeback when you are leveling up, like it's so difficult. And this is what really stops a lot of people from reaching greatness or from reaching their next level, is because when they get to that moment where the pressure's on and they look ahead and they just can't see the breakthrough, they just can't see the success. They're under pressure, they're in pain, their ego's hurt, their emotions are crushed, their energy's low, and they're like looking for that light and they can't see the light. And what people like Wout do is they don't need to visually see it. They can see it in their mind, right? They can make sense of the adversity that they're going through, and they can make sense of the challenge that they're going through. And they can say, you know, I've had past experiences like this where my breakthrough was right on the other side of this dark moment. And I'll tell you what, from my own experience, that is so true. A lot of times when that big breakthrough comes, it comes after countless failure. And so we look at Wout, we look at the getting beat in the sprint. We look at him losing the 3-up sprint or you know, the 3-against-1 race. We look at all the negative articles in the press. We look at the pain, the scar on his knee, like all these things, like these are the storm, right? But guess what? As soon as that storm breaks, as soon as that cloud pushes just a little bit, he's got so much strength, momentum, and passion that he is going to plow right through that cloud, right, into a huge victory, right? An enormous victory. It's not going to be just something that we're all like, wow, like that's what you used to do. Welcome back. It's going to be something huge, right? It's going to be a big victory. It's going to be something that you know, people cannot even imagine that was set up for him, right? And it's going to be something, and listen to this, it's going to be something that he envisioned. It's something that he saw. It's something that, like, when he was in the operating room or when he's walking around on crutches or when he's pedaling one-legged on the bike, right? It's something that, like, he used a visual to get him through the tough moments. And that's how it starts. And so when you guys have your adversity and you guys have your setback, it's important to kind of like create that visual within your own mind of who you're going to become and what you're going to be able to do when you get to that place. That is key to getting to the next level. That is key to getting through the tough moments. That is key to breaking through to your next version of yourself, right? And so I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. You know, it's 9:00 on a Friday night. I finally just grabbed the microphone, threw it down, put it in front of my camera. Yeah, and recording it. I'm going to try to evolve these, do more of them, get better at them, and try to create some more useful information or content for you guys that hopefully will help. So you guys know where to find me on Instagram or at Tom Danielson or on X at Tom Danielson. Hit me up there. Send me if you guys have any questions or you want topics you want me to cover on here. And we'll be breaking down more professional cycling. We'll be breaking down some coaching, some training concepts, and we'll be breaking down some of my own experiences that I've had as a coach and as a cyclist along the way. So appreciate you guys listening. Looking forward to doing more of these. All right. Later.